Hey folks, welcome to the break room. And you know what? For the first time ever, when people ask, hey, are you wearing lipstick? The answer is actually yes. Not for any particular reason. I just had it on for something else and haven't taken it off yet, and I'm lazy. So, let's talk about Dracula. The Stephen Moffat, Mark Gatiss, BBC, Netflix thing. This is not going to be super detailed because obviously it's not topical anymore. That's why it's on the break room. But wow. Okay, first of all, my main concern that I had from the trailer was that the guy playing Dracula himself didn't give me a lot of sense of presence. Now, to be fair, he did very little in that trailer. It was mostly a mood piece. But I just didn't get a lot off of him. Well, he's great. I think the reason he didn't work for me in the trailer was he didn't really say much. You just kind of saw him. And his presence and why he's good in the part is all in the line delivery. So when they did the first trailer and it just ended with just him with the grin, I was like, because that wasn't enough. His best work is all in the delivery of the lines and in the way he interacts with people. So they didn't put his strengths on display in that trailer. The progression of this thing is, it's a trip. So it starts out only slightly askew from the story as it exists in the original novel. Because we start with Jonathan Harker, and, he's in an asylum, and he looks like hell. So that's your clue that things are already going to be a little bit different, because Jonathan Harker, he came out of Transylvania in a bad way, but not that bad. So we get his time in Transylvania, though, and it's pretty close to what happened in the novel, which was interesting. But then we get to he was turned into a vampire, and this whole thing going on at the convent that Dracula then shows up at, and you're like, okay, this is different. And then the nun is Agatha von Helsing. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? So, okay. So that's the level of nuts we're going with here. But I rolled with it, and I had fun with it. I think the big thing that is to the benefit of this, if I were to compare it to, say, Sherlock, which Moffat and Gatiss also did, is that this thing goes in some insane directions, especially by the end, and I'll get there. But it gets away with it, not completely. I think it gets away with it better than what happened at the end of Sherlock, because while it has a dour mood, there's less of a sense that it's taking itself seriously. Sherlock had taken itself deathly seriously too many times for that final episode to land. It was just too stupid. It was too stupid for that show, at least. Whereas Dracula, the vibe of it reminded me a little bit of Gotham. Not quite as campy as Gotham, but in that sort of, look, this is dark, but it's also ridiculous enough to get away with being a little bit stupid. That's because, and writing that balance is always an interesting thing if something can pull it off, because if you can't, then being super serious can be to your detriment. Because if your plot does something stupid, it completely breaks the spell. Whereas if you don't take yourself uber seriously the whole way through, then if your plot does something dumb, you kind of roll with it. It's why Save Martha completely failed in Batman v Superman. Whatever you think of the rest of that movie, like, that moment lands like a brick. It's terrible because it's kind of dumb, and the movie, it takes itself way too seriously for that to get away with doing that. So Dracula balances that pretty nicely through the first two episodes. The second episode I actually liked quite a bit. I like the whole extending the Demeter out into a full length episode and really digging into him working his way through the crew and the passengers, and I really did quite enjoy that. And then we get to the third episode. And while the spoiler warning, I guess, leap to modern times is bold, and conceptually, I think the show kind of gets away with it because the show overall is just dumb enough for you to roll with that. I don't know what it's in service of. It feels very gimmicky. Like there is almost nothing being done with the fact that it's in modern day that really impacts the story in any way. You know, it could have been just one generation later. We could have been the early 1900s or something, you know, far enough along that, you know, maybe it's not Agatha's great niece. It's just her niece, straight up. And, you know, we're dealing with slightly advanced technology, but still in a period mood piece because the whole vibe sort of shifts. And then they made the both interesting and odd decision to sort of circle back to the book somewhat and introduce characters that I hadn't gotten to yet, like Lucy and Renfield. Now, Renfield I did like, because I like Mark Gatiss as an actor, and Renfield as a lawyer. That's honestly kind of brilliant. I kind of love that. To be completely honest, I really do like that idea, and he played it really well. And, you know, having Lucy and Quincy and Jack, and that's like, okay, it's not bad. I think that they introduced that. That's an odd place to decide to end your thing with, to have it build to Lucy of all people. And I think that's part of where things get thrown off a little, that we skip over Mina and dwell on Lucy. Now that said, you know, what was done there was kind of interesting. And there was definitely a tragedy too when she realizes the physical condition that she's in, and that hits her. Like, she sold the hell out of that revelation hitting her. That was rough. Moffat's really hung up on the "don't cremate me" thing, isn't he? Because this is not a first. Doctor Who, what was it? Dark Water? Yeah. Moffat, what have you got against cremation, dude? Seriously. And, like, sold it much harder than this, because Doctor Who, it was just introduced as a concept. The idea that people will feel it burning. Here we watch it and, it's kind of harrowing. And then the way that it ends felt rushed. It didn't feel like the natural culmination and conclusion of the conflict between Dracula and Sister Agatha. It should have, but it didn't. Partly because it didn't marry particularly well with what was going on with Lucy. It felt very tangential to that. And then in addition to that, you've got the fact that it just sort of ends suddenly with these weird twists, I guess, that don't get properly explained, and I'm not even entirely sure what those are about. Like the whole sun doesn't actually burn him thing. I don't know. It's like, if I really wanted to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, I could rewatch it and try and sort it out, but it didn't quite land well enough for me to bother doing that. Which is a bummer, because I think the first two episodes especially are actually really solid. And the third one isn't even bad. It just felt cobbled together. You know what it felt like? It felt like after a book series is done, or a film series, and then the sequel is done a while later, and it's like awkwardly crowbarred in, like, to involve elements and it's very much a cash grab. It had that feel. It felt like The Cursed Child is what it felt like. Yeah, it's that, or Lethal Weapon 4. You know, it has that kind of odd feel. Not enough distance to be like, ooh, it's a revival, you know, Mad Max Fury Road, but far enough from when these things were in their stride to be like, oh, you're just milking the franchise now, aren't you? Or Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That's what it felt like, which is really weird because they were all made together at the same time, but that is really the vibe of that third one. It's an odd thing that I'm still glad I watched the whole thing, but yeah, ends really weird. So that's Dracula. You've seen it, what'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something on down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Share this around, like, subscribe. I've got a Patreon if you want to help keep all this going. And I'll see you next time. You need to stop in and take a break.